Got a lot of great information for you here today. Right now we're going to talk about secure mobility in 2014 and maybe give you a framework within which to view mobility and how it affects you as an organization delivering mobility to your users, but also how it affects some of your users. If you pay any attention at all to the news, you can't help but not see article after article about security vulnerabilities. And more of late, you hear about them in the context of mobile. You hear about people arguing over which mobile OS is more secure or less secure. Most recently, we had the, how many people here heard about the Heartbleed vulnerability? Good. I would hope all of you have. It just goes to show that there's a real difference between compliance and security. There's a real difference between things that are validated or certified to be secure. Just because you have that designation does not in any way free us from maintaining our vigilance over what is secure. I would expect to see this continue, these news stories to continue. And I would most expect, frankly, I mean, if history is any judge, I've been in security for the last 8 years or so, and if history is any judge, the moment we start seeing mobile vulnerabilities where you have demonstrable loss, financial loss that can be directly attributed to a single mobile device, the world's going to go nuts. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. You can look at any of the major vendors who study vulnerabilities, whether it's Kaspersky, Symantec, McAfee. You look at the statistics that they tend to publish on a quarterly basis, and you'll see malware now growing thousands of % year over year, especially for the Android platform. And that's not to suggest that Android is insecure and iOS is secure. It's merely to point out that the people that create this malicious code are now also focusing on popular mobile platforms. And so you'll see more of this as we go forward. Now, of course, because we're using mobile devices, they're attractive targets. They're easy to lose, so that's a vulnerability. There are now cities that actually are offering up warnings for people who jog or walk with the little white earbuds. You're a target. It's pretty easy to sneak up on somebody if they've got music blasting in their ears and you see the white earbuds. You have a pretty good idea of what device is attached to the other end of that cord. And so many cities across the globe actually issue warnings to visitors and whatnot for how they conduct themselves in public. One in six users will have a device compromised. Compromise could be a loss, could be a theft. It's a pretty staggering statistic, really, when you consider the amount of phones that are out there. Uh-oh, there we go. The other thing that's interesting, of course, is just the rate with which we're seeing these permeate our lives. We now have more mobile devices sold than desktops and laptops. Well, we'll hit 1 billion by 2016. I mean, it's staggering, really. It makes one wonder, what the future of desktops and laptops even are, or what, we'll be seeing next. And if you think about the pace of change, we've now had personal computers for quite some time, but if you think about the pace of change, years ago when Apple introduced the iPad, the first tablet, now think about this for a second. They introduced a device that nobody wanted. There were no focus groups that told Apple you should do a tablet and you'll own the tablet market. They introduced the device, and within 4 months of its initial introduction, they owned an entire category, and it was flowing right into the enterprise. It actually was the device where many IT people started really dreading the week after Christmas. Right? Because what happened the week after Christmas? All the executives would come back with their shiny new iDevices and tell their IT people, make it work. I want to get email on my device. And the IT people were forced into a really awkward position. One of having to perhaps say no to a C or V level executive and living with the knowledge that this risk and compliance infrastructure that they had built up over the years was literally being put at risk by the very people who had chartered them to keep them secure. And so we started seeing a shift in industry resources to help us secure mobile devices. It's a complex problem. If you think about the sheer number of services each of us accesses in a given day, I'll use myself as an example. The first thing I do when I get up is I check my email. Reach over, grab the mobile device as I'm getting my cup of coffee, check email. So now I've logged into my Exchange server. Now I've been doing this for a long time. I'd like to think I do a better job than most in making sure that my logins are secure, that I use decently complex passwords, that I don't use the same password for each of my bank accounts or each of my systems that I access at work. But let's face it, if you're in IT, the vast majority of people that you support day in and day out aren't so disciplined. You'll hear more from Eugene later, but if you think about how people compartmentalize or fail to compartmentalize information, most people don't use a certain class of passwords for their business information and then another class of passwords for their personal information. I mean, I guarantee you 90% of them are using the same password for both business and personal accounts. And so what this means is not only do you have to worry about protecting your business data and hoping that your end users use reasonable credentials to log in and access that data, but you also, in a way, have to worry about how they're conducting themselves in their personal life. Because if they're using those same passwords in their personal life, what if those get stolen? Years ago, when I was dealing with cryptography, we saw a rash of thefts in New York City, in the US. And these were targeted thefts. They finally figured out, the FBI finally figured out that what someone had done, a ring of criminals, had targeted a financial, had gone to the corporate website, and many corporate websites, maybe yours do, many corporate websites have an About Us page, the executive team. And next and underneath the executive team banner is a bio of each of the officers of the company, proudly stating where their CEO, CFO, CIO was from and their background and their pedigree. And then there's a helpful picture next to the person. And so what the criminals did is they literally waited in the car park, and they had their handy-dandy picture, and they knew who they were looking for, and one by one, they'd follow these guys to restaurants and bars and whatnot after work, and they'd targeted theft their laptops. And they got something like 5 of 6 executives inside of a week. And so, this is real. Criminals know what to look for, they know what they want, they know how to get it, and so it's worth protecting. So back to I got sidetracked a little bit here, but back to this. I start off and I check my email. Then maybe I check Twitter, maybe I log into Salesforce.com, perhaps Facebook. Maybe I'm working on some things that are personal to me. I've got a sick child and I need to get their prescription information to the pharmacy, and so I've got an app that allows me to pay for my pharmacy goods. All of these things are connected to me and my mobile device. For each and every one of those interactions, credentials are being passed from my device to some server or servers out in the ether. And so with each and every one of those interactions, there's an opportunity, frankly, for something to go wrong. Whether that's a man-in-the-middle attack or whether that's me being one of those 1 in 6 people who loses a device and, like many consumers, don't even have a 4-digit passcode on the device. Most operating systems have some form of a keychain that keeps all of our passwords and credentials in one handy spot, which is great for the operating system, but it's also great for those who would wish us harm. And so this really is a growing and complex problem. The question is, how do you get your arms around something that's so inherently complex? There's a number of strategies that are emerging. Many of us in IT, over the years, have been trained to think about our users in the context of our employees. And that's served us fairly well. But that's no longer the case, right? I've not only got to worry about B2E, my employees, but think about it. I've got business partners that I work with as well. Increasingly, I want to get apps and data to people that work with me, but don't necessarily work for me. They're not in my Active Directory, and nor do I want them there. And so I have to think about different strategies on how to get them the apps and the data that I want them to have, but I don't want to relinquish control over the information that's flowing through those. Perhaps you're in the financial sector and you're giving your end users applications that allow them to access their bank accounts, their retail store accounts. And increasingly, we are now interfacing with additional hardware as well. In the Internet of Things, I'm not suggesting that you necessarily want to connect your mobile to your refrigerator, although I'm sure some vendor offers that capability today. In fact, a couple of weeks ago, actually it was 2 months ago, a refrigerator participated in a denial of service attack. It has a full Linux stack in the refrigerator, and they realized refrigerators were participating in a DDoS attack. My point, though, is this. When I get in my car, My phone automatically connects to the Bluetooth in my car system, so now my car entertainment system has passed some sort of credentials between the two, and they're now interacting. My Nike Fitbit band, which tells me how little I'm working out, also interfaces with my phone. There's all these devices that are increasingly interfacing, whether it's our home thermostat, the smoke alarms. All of these interactions are occurring, and again, that one common point of interaction is myself and my mobile device. We're increasingly not separable from those things. So what do you do? How do you enable secure mobility? I want the flexibility, the freedom, the productivity that mobility brings. What are my options? You've got several. The first is do nothing. Enterprise ActiveSync is enough. I can flick that switch. I can give the executives their access to their iPads and their email. Enterprise ActiveSync will do everything I need. It's a strategy. 10 years ago, the answer was, well, I'll buy everyone a phone. I'll own the phone. I know exactly what's on the phone. There's no apps. There weren't back then, so I don't have to worry about additional apps being placed on the phone. Pretty safe, pretty secure environment. At the time, it set the standard for secure mobility. Today, with the advent of other operating systems and the apps that everyone wants and needs to be productive, not necessarily a choice that people are gravitating toward today. Device management. I talked a little bit about how we had a decade or so of risk and compliance tools that most enterprises have standardized on for their desktops. And early on in mobility, the knee-jerk reaction was, well, I want to do the same thing with the mobile device. Much like I employ full disk encryption for a laptop, I want the same sort of thing for my mobile device. If an executive loses a smartphone, if it's lost, if it's stolen, I want the ability to wipe or lock that device. And really, that was the advent for mobile device management, for managing the device itself, the hardware, treating it like another endpoint. Maybe I'll whitelist. I'll say that only specific apps are allowed on the device, or maybe I'll have a blacklist and saying these ones aren't allowed on the device. Dual personas became popular. This idea that, we'll have a work environment, and then we'll have a personal environment. Now, I don't know about you, but my workday is not that clean. I may say somewhere on some HR policy that I work 9 to 5, but it's just not the case. It's kind of become a 24/7 thing, and I'm not implying I work 24/7. It's just those boundaries, those barriers that say, well, right now I'm working and then right now I'm not, aren't really there. I'm doing both all day long. When someone sends me a meeting invite for an 8 a.m. meeting, it's not just a matter of checking my business calendar to see if I'm available. What about that dentist appointment that I've got scheduled? I've got to check my personal calendar to see if I'm actually going to be in the office at that time. So this idea that I'm going to be in the personal mode one moment and the business mode in another is, I think, flawed. And I think users, from a user experience perspective, recognize that it doesn't work either. And so I think dual persona is not necessarily a way to go. Virtualizing the OS sounds great from a security perspective. I mean, ideally, if the information, if the data that you want to keep secure never actually is on the device, it's a great plan. Now, virtualization hasn't really shown itself to scale terribly well, especially when you start thinking about how many employees have mobile devices or multiple mobile devices. And I've heard some people argue that virtualization is taking an already bad experience on a big desktop and putting it on a 3-inch screen. You be the judge. We think containerization is the way to go. Flat and simple. Containerization allows you to compartmentalize information as appropriate, allow individual apps to still securely share information between each other so you're not adversely affecting the user experience. You get to manage your apps, your organizational data in a fully secure fashion without having to control the device, without having to manage the device. Think about that example I gave earlier of wanting to work with a business partner. I can guarantee you don't have a business partner that is willingly going to let you put an MDM profile on their device so you can manage their smartphone. It's never going to happen. And more often, as we contemplate bring your own device for our employees aren't so crazy about us having the ability to erase their photos and all of their personal information that are on the device. And so we think containerization is a perfect compromise of respecting the end user privacy without having to relinquish any of the security or control I need as an organization to keep our corporate data safe. So as I think about containerization in that same example I gave you a moment ago, for all of my business-to-employee engagements, I can keep my email, my calendar, my contacts, perhaps the ISV applications that I give to my users to make them productive, to allow them to collaborate with each other. I can have those all secure. I can keep them in a state where they can securely share documents and data with each other, but I don't have to worry about leakage. I don't have to worry about a secure email being sent to their business account and having them take and cut and paste that information into their personal email. I can actually, through policy, prevent that sort of thing from happening. And in a B2B context, I'm free to work with my business partners and give them applications that help strengthen our relationship. Maybe it's a channel partner who's driving revenue for my company. We've got a number of customers who have created custom apps that contain everything from price book information to product information, and they're able to give those applications to their business partners who make use of them. But if circumstances change and that relationship changes, perhaps they're no longer selling my company's products, with the hit of a button, I can remove their access to those particular apps. And so it makes a very nice solution for that sort of arrangement. On the consumer side, I may have, as a consumer, multiple applications that allow me to communicate with my bank, perhaps get information about my credit card. And let's say my bank and my credit card are both from the same vendor. Well, great. Those two apps can communicate and share information with each other. But my other credit card, different company entirely, while it's secure and containerized, is prevented from sharing information from those first two apps that I mentioned. And so it makes a nice solution for B2C applications as well. We're seeing another example of that. We're seeing financials, for example, create applications that they're delivering to high net worth individuals. There's often a financial advisor specifically tied to a specific customer. And that application allows that individual customer to know when their advisor is available and to communicate directly with them while getting access to their account information. So there's all kinds of really creative solutions that this type of scenario can enable. And of course, the Internet of Things as well. You know, I may have a number of devices, a couple of which, my thermostat, my smoke detectors, may come from the same vendor. There's no reason why I can't have information passing between those two securely. So as you think about the life cycle, you've probably all at one point or another dealt with application life cycles. With regard to mobility, it's not all that different, except you tend to have more hardware considerations in the mix. First consideration, of course, is the classic build versus buy. Am I going to buy the app off the shelf? Am I going to engage in custom development? We often see organizations taking advantage of both. But once you have apps, you have to have some way of deploying those apps. If you think about apps, on the one hand, the easiest thing in the world for me to do is to get an app to your device. However, having said that, how do you get an app to somebody's device where you don't want to put the app in the Apple App Store or the Google Play App Store, right? Because maybe it is a custom app, a private app that I don't want the public to have access to. Those mobile devices. And so in the context of desktops and laptops, we often have corporate disk images, right? We blast every incoming laptop with that corporate disk image, and that determines what apps are on that device. In the mobile side, corporate disk image idea, not so much. But an enterprise app store effectively can act as the moral equivalent of a corporate disk image. You provide employees a branded place where they can go and get all the applications they need to work with you. And that same enterprise app store can be controlled through policy. So the apps that you give your sales force, for example, may in fact be entirely different than the apps you give your marketing personnel, or different yet again than the apps you deliver to your business partners. Everyone's got a secure login, but they only get the applications that you've chosen for them specifically. And so it's a great way for you to handle deployment. On the management side, in the life cycle, I want to know a lot of things. I not only, of course, want to set policy, whether it's who has access to what, whether it's under what conditions certain apps can be used, or whether or not specific features in apps like cut and paste are actually allowable outside of the container. I want statistics, I want analytics, I want to know who's using what. Was this last app that I created and spent money on, was it a good investment? Are people using it? When are they using it? Are certain geographies using it more than another geography in our company? There's a whole rich set of data that suddenly starts to become very important to us. And of course, support. I can't tell you how many companies we've run across that have been running, there apparently is a contest going on globally to see who can have the world's longest running pilot implementation of MDM. Company after company we talk to has got some portion of their company running a mobility pilot. Maybe it's 1,000 users and they're a 50,000 person company. That's interesting. I mean, that was great when you had a couple of executives coming in after Christmas with an iPad. But most of us are at the point where we're trying to figure out, how do I get mobility to the masses? How do we democratize mobility so that everybody who can benefit from it is able to, and is able to do so securely? Scale is really important here. Being able to scale that deployment, not just purchase the software and set the software up, but to be able to handle the fact that most of my users have a desktop, a laptop, a phone, a tablet. If the only thing you do is to enable BYOD, the very next day, you've tripled, probably, the number of endpoints that you're supporting. And so thinking through what that support model looks like. How do you train somebody to answer the phone and actually not having them have to know what kind of device is on the other end? I mean, it's bad enough to try and think about, well, is it Android, is it iOS, is it Windows Phone? But then what form factor? And what modifications did the specific vendor of that specific phone make to the operating system that further may change behaviors? This statistic's old, but it's worth sharing nonetheless. A year ago, New York Times, there was an article talking about mobility. And the author pointed out that as of May of 2013, there were 6 iOS devices in the wild. Now that's increased since then. I think the number is now 9. But it was a pretty constrained number, right? And everything after iOS 3, from a pure software and architecture perspective, is very compatible with each other, very predictable, support the same MDM commands more or less. Pretty straightforward. I can deal with 9. Guess how many Android implementations there were as of May 1st, 2013? Somebody guess. 3,000? It's a very good guess. 4,997 was the statistic that they gave. 4,997 different Android devices had been commercially shipped by May of last year. It's a year-old statistic now. That hasn't gotten any better, right? And so the idea from a support perspective that you might need to somehow magically understand each and every device that your users are bringing in the company if you're supporting BYOD is a tough problem. And so we have to comprehend it somehow. And then you layer on top of that, of course, the things we were talking about earlier with regard to business to consumer, business to employee, business to business, and Internet of Things. We have to accommodate not only just the life cycle, but the life cycle layered on top of all the different audiences that we need to serve. Now, security is very important. And as I mentioned, and I made the point earlier, on the one hand, having any one particular accreditation or validation or certification doesn't by definition make you secure. It certainly is a badge that indicates a certain set of components or a certain set of algorithms have been deemed acceptable or certified by a given organization. And Good's very proud of all of the certifications and validations and accreditations we have. And globally, there are many that are important. But like we saw with Heartbleed, having those is not enough. Right? There needs to be a level of transparency in how we handle security, how we communicate with users and customers, and frankly, with each other across the industry, as well as how we use these things. Having great encryption, for example, so that I encrypt data at rest on a given device, while that's interesting, if I'm not encrypting data as it moves from my device to a back office server, what have I accomplished? We need to think through the whole life cycle of data, where it lives and how it moves, and secure it accordingly. What Good's done is we've created a mobility platform. We recognize that no one particular technology is going to serve all of your needs. Many of us started with MDM, and it's a great technology for some specific use cases. Mobile application management became popular last year, and certainly that has a wide variety of applications open to it. Thinking about the enterprise app store, thinking about the ability to have analytics and be able to know who's using what to handle the deployments, the various management tie-ins to other consoles, to be able to mine the data and log it, to start to really have predictive tools at our fingertips so that we know that there's a problem that's about to happen, not just a problem that's already happened. We've taken that platform, and then on top of it, we've delivered collaboration applications of our own: the email, calendar, contacts, secure instant messaging, access to the SharePoint and file server repositories that you have on your back end. All of that is built on top of the platform, along with a robust ecosystem of third parties who have also delivered applications on that same platform. And then gave customers such as yourselves the ability to create custom apps, again, on that same platform. And the result is whether an application is from good technology, from one of our trusted ISV partners, or an application that you create, the end result is that you have a series of applications that work together. The end user experience isn't violated in any way. I mentioned the ecosystem. There's no shortage of partners that we've gotten, some of which you'll see here today at during the breaks next door. Pick any major business category, and we've got applications that can help you deliver workflows that make your folks more productive. The market's changed quite a bit. You had the traditional mobile vendors, dealing primarily in hardware. Some of the traditional enterprise players, there's been no shortage of entrants and consolidations and buyouts, the Oracles, the SAPs, the IBMs, and then some of the niche players. There's no shortage of products out there. We were talking to one of our analyst friends who do an annual study of mobility vendors, and last year I remember talking to one of them, and their off-the-cuff comment was, "We stopped counting at 145." There's no shortage of companies in this space, and yet everyone seems to focus on one narrow slice of the technology. We've come to realize over time in working with our customers that it's not about any one piece of that technology. It's about giving you control over the entirety of your enterprise. It may well be that you have different users with different needs. Of course you do. It may well be that mobile device management makes sense for kiosk devices that you make available in retail establishments, but your sales team has a completely different set of needs, and you're going to use a containerization solution. Well, let's do that in such a way that the whole thing is manageable. Good offers exactly that. We've got customers in all sectors. Many people know us or believe that we have a reputation of serving only those in regulated industries, and certainly we have no shortage of governments globally that use our products, of financial institutions that fall under varying compliance laws that they have to adhere to ensure that their customer and financial information is safe. But the reality of it is, over half of our customers come from non-regulated environments as well. We have everything from manufacturers to retailers. We've got companies like Mitsubishi Electric who are creating custom apps that they provide their air conditioner, their HVAC distributors and sales folks, so that they can go into a customer's location with an iPad using apps that were custom created by Mitsubishi using our tools, use augmented reality to hold an iPad up to a wall, work with the customer to figure out which HVAC unit they want to use, and using augmented reality, show the customer right there what that wall is going to look like once that unit gets installed. And if the customer likes that, they can literally generate a quote and an order right from there. They've doubled their sales productivity with this set of apps that they've delivered. Companies are doing really exciting stuff with mobile, no doubt about it. We're proud of some of our statistics. When I left the office on a week ago now, we have 1.74 million devices that are now part of the Good network. It's a lot of devices. It's a lot of devices. In apps, there's been over 1,100 custom applications that our customers have created. In the last 18 months, 1,100 apps. We're very proud of that fact. Customers have taken the platform really to heart and are not only purchasing ISV apps, but also creating their own custom applications as well. In terms of intellectual property, over 165 issued patents I think if you add issued and pending, it's something like 265. And of course, you know, the global 1,000, the Fortune 100, pick your metric. We show strength. So with that, I'm going to move to our next speaker. But thank you very much. I look forward to continuing the conversation throughout the course of the day.